Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to AdAge's custom webcast sponsored by Proof HQ, a Workfront company. The topic of today's webcast is 3 ways to fix your review and approval process, how agencies can deliver work nearly 30% faster. I'm Christopher Hosford with the AdAge team, and I'm your moderator today. We have just a few quick items to go over before we begin. We'll hear from today's presenters, and then we'll open the floor to your questions. Now, to participate in the Q&A portion of the webcast, all you have to do is type your question into the Ask a Question text area below the presentation window, and then click the Submit button. You can submit the questions at any time during the webcast, and we'll address as many as time permits after our presenters' prepared remarks. Also, please note the series of widgets that are available for you towards the bottom of the console. Now I'd like to introduce our presenters for today. Michael Cunningham is Content Marketing Manager at Proof HQ, a Workfront company, where he's responsible for driving awareness and demand for the company's software offering through high-level content planning, content creation, and publishing strategy. Along with Michael, we have John Hawkins, Manager of Enterprise Solutions Engineering at Workfront. Prior to his current role, John was recognized as one of the top solutions engineers at Workfront, successfully helping numerous clients streamline their marketing work processes. Before joining Workfront, John spent 8.5 years working in the public relations and marketing industries, and he has an MBA from Brigham Young University. Now, before we get to our webinar, we have just a quick survey of our audience to get a sense of where everybody is on this topic of the review and approval process. And here it is. Do you have a standardized review and approval process already? And we have 4 possible answers. Yes, of course, version 1, 2, 3, and onwards. No, or uh-oh, are you talking about a process here?
I'm not seeing this.
So, while we're waiting for your responses, I'd just like to remind everyone to feel free to submit your questions at any time. You can address them to a specific speaker if you'd like, or to anyone on the panel at all. So let's see how you did on the survey questions. I see the answers are just about all in. Do you have a standardized review and approval process already? Yes, 44% do indeed, although I should say that 36% are in the ad infinitum category. Well, Michael, what do you make of these survey results? Certainly very interesting.
They are. In fact, I'm a little surprised that there are 46% of the respondents do have a standardized review and approval process. I almost expected that to be a little bit lower. However, that still leaves 54% of everybody without a standardized process. So this kind of falls into mostly what I expected. But the great thing about this webinar is that whether or not you have a standardized process, maybe you'll be able to improve the one that you have based on what you learned from here today. So that's my hope, is that you'll either learn how to build a new one to improve things for your company, or you can improve the one that you have. And with that, I guess I'm going to take over control of the webinar, if you don't mind, Chris.
Nope, it's all yours, sir.
All righty. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Again, I'm Michael Cunningham, and John will be chiming in shortly. So I want to talk to you about the review and approval process, and unfortunately, it might be broken for all of you. So we all know that a main component of effective marketing project management is the creative content review and approval process. Because without a proper process, a project can bounce ineffectively from version to version, lose focus, and flounder with little progress. So let me show you what I mean. So for the most part, the marketing creative review and approval process is very manual, right? It's resource heavy and it might be inefficient. So most of you might still manage the process by emailing large PDF attachments back and forth, or using an FTP to send artwork, manually walking proofs from reviewer to reviewer, or even, God forbid, sending faxed copies of designs back and forth for feedback. And the stakeholders, you're generally collaborate via email, and layered on top of all of this are dozens of additional tasks. At the center of this maelstrom of manual activity typically sits a marketing project manager or a traffic manager who's acting like a traffic cop, trying to keep the process moving and the project on schedule. So if you look at the example that we have here, lots of moving parts, lots of people involved, no real structure. Now, that could be fine for you, and it could be working fine, but there are risks associated with this, and those include conflicting comments and decisions, file size limits when you're emailing someone, service stability if the files get too big when you're emailing them, and keeping track of all those versions. Those of you who said you're keeping track of your process by version 1, 2, 3, and 4, you know what I'm talking about. So, and then there's additional time and effort with other teams outside of the core review team. It leads to a big old mess. And I've got, like I said, good news and bad news for all of you. The bad news is your process is probably broken, or worse, you don't have one to begin with. But the good news is, with a small amount of strategic planning and investment, your review and approval process can be powerful and productive. So let's take a look at how to do that. But first, one thing I want you to take away from this webinar is that the creative review and approval process is a business critical process. It's not a take a shotgun and blast out your project into multiple reviewers' hands and wait for the replies to come in. It is business critical. And it must be optimized to bring the highest level of value for you, your team, your clients, and your organization. It is part of the project management process that requires more strategic follow-through than simply checking off a box on the project timeline. Now, let's look at the different functions within a marketing department or an organization and see how the creative review and approval process affects them, because this involves more than just the creative team. So the first one is brand management. Now, brand management encompasses more functions than just marketing, right? So they include market research, communications, design. The brand management team develops an accountability structure for stakeholders during the content creation process and marketing campaign execution. So they also assist in the development and refinement of graphic and digital compliance standards. Brand control and accountability are extremely important within brand management. And with varying levels of edicts, audit trails are essential for providing transparency into all account activity. Now, with the optimized and streamlined review and approval process, brand management teams can deliver marketing campaigns that are on brand and on message, and can better manage proofs through multiple versions. This creates better audit trails with a greater degree of transparency. So I'm tired of hearing myself talk, so John, why don't you jump in and talk about the operations team?
You bet, Michael. Thank you. So marketing operations, this is the function of the organization that really assists the C-suite in the development of the organization's policies and procedures and goals, and manages and optimizes marketing technology. It's becoming a much more important role as we get further into the technological era. What happens with marketing operations is, because they're responsible for managing marketing technology of the organization, they're typically the first group that IT calls when multiple email messages are jamming up the server, right? And so you know, with what they're in charge of is the function to find solutions that plague the team with inefficiencies. This includes that review and approval process. Okay, and so their role is very important with regards to how files are being shared back and forth among the team. Michael, let's take a look at the creative professionals now.
Oh, gladly, because that's sort of where I fit in mostly. And, you know, the creative professionals and other folks such as graphic designers and lead print specialists, creative directors, they work in an organization's marketing department or the marketing at the ad agency, right? And so they're responsible for all the production of creative design and advertising projects while balancing time and cost restraints. So often, creative professionals are on the receiving end of a pile of reviewer comments, both physical and digital. Hands up for those of you who have received Microsoft Word documents with about 16 different colors in them based on 16 different commenters. So that's what I'm talking about. And that's an example of without an organized review and approval process, creative professionals must work with the project manager, if there is even one, or they're often left to decipher which comments and changes are used when multiple ones are made on each creative asset. It's a headache, and this is why it needs to be a business critical process for creative professionals. John, this is your strength, project management.
Yes, it is. Project management is something that we specialize here at Workfront, and the project management individual is typically charged with balancing large volumes of work, and to meet the boss or the client's expectations. They're responsible for organizing and managing the production of creative design and advertising projects. This demands less hand-holding and more accountability from team members, or that's what they hope for. But how the review and approval process affects them, this is the last thing these professionals need, is an unorganized and mismanaged review and approval process to slow them down. They're going at a very high speed of velocity, right? And so without the appropriate balance of authority, diligence, and the agility, to manage varying levels of work, the day-to-day management of the creative content becomes very cumbersome, sluggish, problematic. And so to streamline what they want, what they need is very specific steps along that creative review and approval process so that they don't have to necessarily think about it all the time.
And speaking of a group of people who don't want to think too much about additional processes are folks involved with account management. They've got their hands full with managing and maintaining client relationships, whether it's internal or external. So communicating and managing expectations is a key success factor for this particular function, as well as developing accountability structures for project stakeholders. So the last thing they want to deal with is an inefficient review and approval process, because if they have that throws a serious wrench into project timelines. Maintaining the peace between clients and creative during the creative project lifecycle is hard enough without being burdened with monitoring or fielding complaints about something as seemingly as simple as getting an approval.
And finally, compliance. Who wants to hear about compliance, right? Compliance has its hands in every cookie jar, right? It's a prevalent business concern, partly because of an ever-increasing number of regulations that require companies to be vigilant about maintaining a full understanding of everything that's happening with their regulatory compliance requirements. Some of the prominent regulations, as we all know, are Sarbanes-Oxley, HIPAA, Dodd-Frank, FSMA, Truth in Lending, FTC. It wasn't long ago that marketers would have considered compliance to be the responsibility of the CEO or the CFO, maybe even the legal department. But given the rapid rate of innovation in marketing techniques in the area of personalization, user-generated content, and demographic targeting, there's a new level of scrutiny being placed on marketing operations and content marketing. And it ultimately comes down to marketing compliance to make sure that these levels of scrutiny are being met. In addition, compliance regulations are constantly changing, and to be honest, you wouldn't expect your specifically sales or marketing team to keep up with all the specifics of the various laws and privacy acts. And so it comes to compliance to make sure that that audit trail is in place regarding the key aspects of the compliance needs of the organization. So some key takeaways here are that the creative review and approval process have to be optimized and managed, right? And far too often, it's an afterthought. We hear a lot from the industry, from clients, that the creative review and approval process typically takes longer than the actual work being done because it's an afterthought. But if we can streamline that, it'll become much more of a key integral part of the business, as we mentioned earlier.
That's so true, John, so true. And so what I hope at this point is that everybody here realizes the importance of putting a process in place for review and approval. It really is a business critical process. Now, let's take a look at a few ways to fix your review and approval process or improve upon the one that you have. So we're going to walk you through a 3-step process to do that. So number one, we're going to evaluate your current process. We're going to give you a few questions to answer about that. And then we're going to give you some tips on how to build a new workflow for review and approval. And then John specifically, he's going to take you through the wonderful world of change management, because change is always welcomed by people. All right, so step one, let's evaluate your current process. Now, because it's hard to fix something if you don't know what's broken. So in order to get some clarity on the time and cost that's probably wasted on your current process and learn where the productivity leaks are occurring, we're going to document your current process. Now, documenting your current process provides some greater visibility, and some other benefits of this exercise include it clarifies the time and cost that could be wasted on your current process, displays where productivity leaks are occurring, creates a baseline for comparison so you know where you're starting from and where you're going to end up, and it helps you think of all the pain points, obstacles, frustrations, and headaches caused by your current process, things that you might just ordinarily assume are part of the process. If you get those down on paper, you'll realize that these things can be improved or eliminated altogether. So let's take you through a few questions to answer for auditing your current process. So question number one is, how do you currently route content in your organization for review and approval? So for this exercise, think of the amount of content that must be reviewed and think of all the ways you distribute it for review. So it can be as simple as putting an asset in a folder, the old familiar job jacket, and passing it from one person to the next, or using a variety of methods for routing assets, like printing it out or sending it via email or an FTP server. Is there any visual mapping to the workflow that you use, or what are the current tools for project management that you use? Is that part of your process as well, or do you just not use project management software for review and approval? So question two is, which groups, departments, and individuals participate in the process? Now this is important because gaining visibility into the number of people and departments who actively review your content, this lets you gain control of the process. So you might discover several people who have no need to review certain projects. And when you have unnecessary reviewers, that mires the process. If applicable, list any outside, offsite, or freelancers, like proof editors or copy editors, or maybe you do have some outside consultants who occasionally review your material, and then build a comprehensive list of everybody. So the third question, are your reviews sequential or parallel? Now, let me explain a little bit what that means. A sequential review process means that a draft of a creative asset cannot move forward until a person or group has reviewed it first. So for example, a proof must first be reviewed by the creative director before it can be reviewed by the vice president of marketing, before it can be reviewed by the executive vice president, etc. So it's just a straight line moving from point A to B to C to D based on the previous approval. A parallel review has two or more separate groups of people reviewing a proof at the same time. So for example, the product group and proofreaders review a proof concurrently and implement changes before creating the next draft, then pass it along to the next step of the approval workflow. So multiple groups reviewing the same document at the same time, and then you implement all of those changes before you move in to the next step. Or perhaps your workflows currently include a combination of both or none at all. Again, I'll use the example of you take the shotgun blast. You just launch it into the wind, and whoever manages to grab it first and return the reviews in first wins the prize of the week. So the bottom line here is that understanding the path a creative asset takes during review and approval helps you identify the potential bottlenecks and roadblocks. All right, so the fourth question you should ask when you are evaluating your current process is, how many review cycles are typical in your process? This sort of goes to that poll question we had before. So you might not be able to fully answer this question if you're not tracking, unless you're tracking things by version 1, version 2, version 3, but that may not be a true measure because a single version of a document might be reviewed multiple times and you might make multiple edits to a particular version of a document before it qualifies as version 3 or version 4. So you need to keep in mind how many the actual review cycles a version goes through, as opposed to just the number of versions a document goes through. And the final question to ask is, what kinds of creative content are you reviewing and approving? It just goes to all the different types of stuff that you make with your group. Is it marketing collateral, web pages, videos, podcasts, newsletters, advertisements, press materials, etc.? So everybody here produces a wide variety of content, but it's essential to consider the types of collateral and media that you're going to review to ensure the appropriate workflow is in place, as well as assigning the appropriate reviewers to the project. So what I mean by that is, what a press release might not need a certain department to review it, but you might have discovered that a department is actually reviewing press releases unnecessarily because that's just how you've always done it. And so this is where categorizing each piece of marketing content, and then, well, I'll save that for the next section because I'm going to show you what to do with each piece of content and how you assign that to each role. So let's move on to building a new workflow. So the great thing about, it's a great thing and it's a frustrating thing about building workflow is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all when it comes to the review and approval process. And that's why it's important that you document how you currently do things. Because designing an adaptable workflow with defined stages allows you to route reviews and approvals based on the type of content and the number of people involved, instead of taking a more static approach or a more shotgun approach. And so this allows team members and reviewers in each stage to have an immediate understanding of their respective roles in the review and approval process. So let's take a look at a few steps that you can take to build your new workflow. So number one, identify the project and asset type. So you made all of your lists. From previously, you listed all the different asset types. And so knowing those types will help you create each workflow. So you have a workflow for a marketing brochure. You'll have a workflow for a print ad. You'll have a workflow for a digital ad. You'll have a workflow for an update to a product sheet. That's what I'm talking about here. So we'll start with identifying each of the types of assets that you have. Next, you're going to identify all of the reviewers and approvers who would need to touch that particular piece of content. Now, there may be different teams or individuals who need to review a piece of content, and you might need a specific order. So you may not want one team to see the content until another team has approved it, which is the sequential workflow, or you may not want people on one team to see comments from another team, which is kind of an example of the parallel workflow. But either way, you've identified the reviewers who are going to be working on particular pieces of content and in what order. So the third step is then you define these review stages. So this goes back to that, let's take control back from version 1, 2, 3, and 4. So establishing this number, you can gain greater control over the process. Again, like I said before, when does one particular group need to review a piece of asset versus another? When does legal need to review the project? When does compliance need to get involved? Are they at the beginning of the process, or are they at the end of the process? We shall review it until it's done is not really a quantifiable number or a process that you can manage. So you want to manage it, even templatize it based on the assets that you are creating. And finally, you want to define who has final approval for each stage and job. Without accountability, a review stage could be held up by indecision or bogged down by endless rounds of discussion. I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, have encountered this, where endless rounds of discussion have taken place on pieces of content, on different versions of a piece of content. So by this final approval, you make sure that your workflow offers sufficient flexibility to allow you to support different roles in the process, such as a reviewer only, reviewer and approver, or primary decision maker or final decision maker. So once you've defined the type of feedback required for each stage, someone must be made accountable for the final approval of those stages. Otherwise, it's going to drift aimlessly. So make sure that your workflow offers sufficient flexibility to allow you to support different roles. But also draw some lines. Make sure that somebody is designated as final approver. Because without accountability, the review stage can be held up by indecision or bogged down by endless rounds of discussion. And you don't want that. So now we've gone through some things for you to consider. So let's design your new workflow. We recommend creating, some people work best visually, some people work best with lists. So you can create a flow chart. One within our system here at Proof HQ, it's a flow chart design. If you don't wish to, if you're not using our system and you don't want to draw one out on your notebook, you can use some apps like PowerPoint. They have a flow chart, or there's an online program called Lucid Chart, LUCIDCHART, lucidchart.com. You can create a free account and you can develop your workflows through that online system. Or you can list out each stage, right, on a piece of paper and the steps that are involved with each. So once you create a workflow, reevaluate it. Can you possibly improve the process by removing a stage or two and tweaking the routine or tweaking the routing? So, the goal is to get approval, right? But if you can do it in 6 steps, why do it in 10, right? So that's how you take those first 4 bullets, use that information, design your workflow, maybe do a flow chart, write out the different steps, write out the different stages, have it in front of you. Because once you've designed your new and improved workflow, it's time for the hard part, right? Changing the hearts and minds of your creative or marketing team. And John, this is your expertise, so why don't you walk us through implementing a creative review and approval process?
Sounds good. I'm glad I get the hard part, I guess. So the first step here in the creative changing management or change management is to create urgency. Okay, for change to happen, it helps if everyone involved really wants it, right? If not everyone can see the need for it, then they're not going to change. So what you have to do is develop a sense of urgency around the need for the change. And this will help you spark that initial motivation and get things moving along. So what you can do, there's a couple things that we'll outline here, is detail the problems that the current process has by highlighting the negative impact it has on the team in terms of time and resource and money. Right? Open and honest and convincing dialogue about what's happening with your current process that makes it inefficient. And lastly, if a lot of people start talking about it, about the change that you're proposing, the urgency can build and feed on itself. It can start that, that spark can turn into a wildfire and help to create that sense of needed change. Okay? The next thing here is to convince people, right, that change is necessary. And to do so, you have to have leadership. It doesn't have to be from the executive suite, your C-suite of the organization. It can be from any group of people. Okay, you have leaders in your organization that don't necessarily have a title, and you can find that effective change comes from that type of leadership. Okay, to lead change, you need to bring people together in a coalition or a team. These influential people, their power comes from a variety of sources, including job title. Right? Not saying that the CEO doesn't have some influence, because definitely he or she does, but status, expertise, and some political importance that individual might have. Okay, so you bring that team together, and once you've formed that change coalition, get them together and have them work as a team and communicate out the change and the benefits of the change, the need for the change to the rest of the organization. Okay, so identify the true leaders in the organization as well as the key stakeholders, and then ask them for the commitment to this change. Okay, and then communicate that to them and have them work together to build that change, what we'll call a change coalition. Okay. Obviously, if your organization is large, you want to grab people from a variety of departments. Okay. Again, not necessarily titled leaders, but emotional, political, experts in their field. That type of leadership is what you want to gather. Okay. So that's the second step in the process. The third step is probably the most self-explanatory, but the least used. Okay, I love the comic on this particular slide. What if, and I know this sounds kooky, we communicated with the employees, right? Deriving the vision of the change and the need for change isn't enough for you to implement the change. Okay, if no one knows about it, no one's going to do anything about it. So you need to communicate the vision across the organization. Communication should take place frequently and at different forums, right? Lunch, right? People can talk about it over lunch. You can talk about it in team meetings. You can talk about it as a whole company. Okay, but use every chance to communicate your vision, and make sure that people understand not only what the change is, but the reason for the change. Okay, so two important factors there when it comes to communication. And then the final thing here is to celebrate short-term wins, right? If people are on this journey for a long, long time and they never see a victory, then they're never going to change, right? It just becomes a laborious exercise that, we have to slog through this again and again and again. Nothing is ever going to matter, right? You don't want that attitude. So quick wins are the best way to keep momentum going. And by quick wins, what we're talking about is your team will have that satisfaction, and the company will immediately see the advantages of the change initiative, right? If a project is finished, in half the amount of time because the change process has really taken place, celebrate that, right? Give rewards. Let people know that what they've done has been very effective. Okay, and then again, communicate that throughout the organization so people see the vision and or they get excited about the vision. Okay, so celebrate those short-term wins.
Awesome. Thanks, John. I'm doing a celebratory dance right now because we've made it through the
Nice.
three-step process of,
Nice.
creating a new review and approval process. So, this process should never consist of sending a proof to every conceivable stakeholder in a project at once, the shotgun approach. And there simply isn't a one-size-fits-all workflow for this process. But as we have walked you through here, by taking the time in advance to determine the routing and reviews of approvals based on the type of content and the type of people involved and documenting the steps in advance, you're going to save time and money. And if you hang around for a few more minutes, I'm going to kind of show you, I'm going to tell you about some stats when it comes to updating your review and approval process, and maybe even improving upon it by going into the cloud and using online proofing. So if you want to, after you've done these steps and you've written things out and you've improved your process, it may be time to think about using an online proofing application, because when you automate this process, our research has shown that you can reduce the effort spent managing proofs by 59% and increase the speed to market by 56%. So let me give you a little visualization of how it might look like once you've not only created your new workflow, but even updated it to the cloud. And you can see that it's a little bit more organized here than the graphic I showed you earlier in the presentation. So we hired an independent consulting firm that specializes in marketing process re-engineering called IntelliLink to do some research for us and develop some metrics. And they measured the business and financial return of online proofing, which is what ProofHQ offers. So one of the things that they found out is that all these different groups in an organization, from brand management to marketing compliance to the creatives to the account agents, productivity is going to increase. So whether or not you're in the cloud or doing it on paper or with a flowchart, you're going to increase productivity. With online proofing, you're going to deliver projects 56% faster. So managing multiple versions and segmenting and localization across different output channels can be a nightmare. But if you're putting it in the cloud, the review teams spend less time manually printing, posting and routing proofs, and consolidating feedback from email and PDF attachments. So another statistics that we found is that you're going to have 29% fewer revisions and a 59% reduction in effort spent managing complex review processes. So you're not going to be searching through email chains for the most recent layouts or comments, and no more endless rounds of meetings and conference calls, right? So productivity, centralized feedback. Again, that's online proofing, but these are steps that you are also taking by writing out the process. So I just wanted to take a second, as we wrap up, just to tell you a little bit about ProofHQ as the sponsor of this program, and thank you, AdAge, for having us today. But simply, we're the company that defines and leads the global market for online proofing, and we do this by delivering an unparalleled experience for our employees and customers. We were founded in 2007. Today we serve more than 3,000 brands and agencies around the world, and this slide just shows you some of the various brands in the various industries that we serve and provide this online proofing solution. Recently we were acquired by Workfront, so this is why John and I are working together today, that we're now one team. And so with the addition of ProofHQ, Workfront can now deliver the most comprehensive marketing work management solution available in the industry. So for marketers and creatives to everybody in between, it's really worth checking out. And at the end of the day, at the end of this, after this webinar, feel free to hop online for demos, proofhq.com or workfront.com, and we'll be glad to take care of you and let you know a little bit or a lot about the type of solutions that we offer. And Chris, we are done. So do we have any questions that anybody wants us to answer?
Well, do we ever? A lot of great questions have come in, and I'd just like to say, Michael and John, great presentation from both of you, a wealth of information, and I'm sure our attendees got an awful lot out of it. Well, yes, indeed, we are ready to open the floor to your questions. And as a reminder, if you'd like to send in some more questions, just type your questions into the Ask a Questions text area and click the Submit button. We've already got lots of good ones, but could always use some more. Now, Michael, one of our attendees was particularly intrigued by your concept of moving into online proofing. And our attendee asks, what advice would you give for an all-digital approval process beyond what you've already explained? For example, how to make it successful, and in particular, what to watch out for, snafus that might arise.
What advice would you give? So what advice would I give for an all-digital approval process? So if by all digital, that means it's all digital content, there's no print content involved. And when it deals, it really works the same way. For online proofing, it works the same way, because whether you're dealing with print materials, audio materials, video materials, or all digital, it's all uploaded into the cloud and managed. And once again, if you're using our system, you're able to build out customized and automated workflows for each type of project. And a project manager or the account manager in charge can then control who sees what and when. So that's at least from the ProofHQ perspective. For if you're looking to write things down and just do it maybe more manual or just flowchart, it's the same thing regardless of the type, whether it's digital or print. It's really all about writing down the process and having visibility into who does what and when based on the different type of collateral. And I hope that answers your question.
I think it did very well. Now, Michael and John, this question came in actually as a segue from the previous one. If you've got a workflow in-house and it's running smoothly, how do you typically share this workflow with the clients outside of the agency? How does this work, and how can you prescribe a way to make this most beneficial so it doesn't get bogged down?
I guess I'll take that one. So how do you share workflow with folks outside of your agency? So again, that goes to, so again, if you're using online proofing, there will be features within the system that allows you to do an internal process before any of that material goes to somebody outside the system. And you're also able to withhold certain comments from any outside clients so that they won't see the internal works that you guys are doing. You'll be able to present to them the version or the draft of the material that you want them to see. And that can be comment free, it can be with comments, or however you want them to view it. So you do have different workflows that you can build into managing an internal workflow, and then sending our system in particular, it would send out an email update to your exterior client that says this particular project is ready for your review. They click on the link in the email, and then they're within the viewer, and they can do their provide comments and either review it with suggested edits, etc. And again, for your manual processes, just write it down and say, at this point of the process, this is when we will send a proof to our customer, to our client. Once stages 1, 2, and 3 have been accomplished, then stage 4 is client approval.
Sounds good. Now, the inevitable question, of course, is what happens if the client sits on his hands and is unresponsive? That certainly is going to throw a monkey wrench into the workflow, isn't it?
It sure does, and that's a sort of a twofold situation where that's when the account manager has got to be working the relationships, right? So if you have built out the process and the review and approval is smooth internally, then the account manager is just responsible for getting the review and comments from the client and badgering them. If you're using our system, it's going to be sending out a lot of reminder emails based on your settings and your preferences. But otherwise, it's what are you going to do, right? Short of bribing or driving over there with a hard copy of something, there's not a lot you can do.
Just be very, very political. Gentlemen, believe it or not, we had several questions on the same topic, and that is, how does this apply to smaller agency? And I'm going to read off, I think, one that typifies the sentiments of all the people that asked this question. I work in a media startup, and we're multitasking like crazy across a small team. Our CEO, CFO, and chairman are very involved and inevitably become our productivity bottlenecks. What are suggestions for a small team that multitask way too much? And this applies, of course, to any agency that's quite small and has a lot of decision makers all vying for attention.
John, do you have anything to start with?
Sure. Yeah, we see this a lot where we've got and not just. I don't think this is a small business problem. I think it's a business problem where you've got lots of people that want to have their input be heard and want to have the final say. The way that we approach it from a Workfront Proof HQ perspective is to have automatic notifications be sent to those individuals once they're kind of up in line, up next. They're sort of, in the batter's box, so to speak. And so it does become a productivity bottleneck, especially when they're in meetings, and so an automatic notification to their phone via email or a text message will let them know that you're waiting on their input to give the final go ahead to that creative piece. But I agree with what Michael said earlier about making it a standardized process where everybody knows where they fit in the structure of the creative review and approval process, and they know that that there's obviously we're all on deadlines, right? That's what we function on, and so knowing that it's been reviewed by so and so, probably 3 or 4 people deep. When it gets to the CEO, CFO, chairman, whatever that title might be, vice president, whatever that title might be, knowing that somebody else has taken a look at this and given their stamp of approval because they're involved in that creative process development, the review development, then typically what we've seen is that they start to trust their employees and take a look at it in a much more efficient and effective manner. Michael, do you have anything to add?
I do, because to the I think it's maybe the opposite end of the spectrum is when you have a high-ranking person in your company who likes to get his or her hands into the cookie jar all the time, and getting involved with a lot of the creation process, and then many of the multiple iterations of a particular piece of content. And that's another type of bottleneck that you can run into. And just to go back again and again and again, make it a defined process. And you may have to draw some lines in the sand and go through some of the pains of change management, but making people understand that projects can get done faster and more efficiently if you have an optimized workflow, whether that be the project management or the review and approval. So you make those specific stages of the CEO, the CFO, legal. They get involved at step 2 or step 3 and not beforehand. Keep them away from that project until the piece of content has reached that point where their input is necessary and welcomed, actually. Before then, it can bog down the process, completely bog down the process. So, whether you need to have reminders on the one end because they're not actually responding, to having somebody who always has their hands in the cookie jar, that standardized process can find that happy medium between both of them and hopefully remove those bottlenecks.
Got it. Now, an outgrowth of this, of the small agency question, is about ROI, but really it could apply to any agency. One of our attendees asked about automation savings. If there's only one person who can give final approval, what cost savings would you expect from automation, or for that matter, in any agency? Any thought about financial ROI here?
Ooh, that one.
Of course, you'd
I don't
mention
know.
time to market, which is significant.
So one of the this is sort of a tricky question to answer, because while I can provide these percentages about fewer revisions and reduction in effort spent, faster project delivery, those are ROI metrics based on time. Time and to a degree effort. When it comes to ROI, that's something that okay, so I'm getting some help here from my little question answer fairy in the background, so thank you, Kelsey, for chiming in. So time is money, and the more billable hours that you're having to deal with is going to cost you more money. So if you're able to if you're able to reduce the number of hours spent on a project and get it reviewed, then you're increasing your ROI by, and here's the thing, it's not so much you're getting more ROI from that particular project, you're increasing your ROI because you're able to increase the amount of projects that you can take on because you're getting the other ones done faster. If you're more efficient, you can take on more work. If you have more work, you're getting more billable hours, more ROI.
Makes perfect sense.
And I would add, let me add to that as well, Michael. If there's only one person that can give final approval, it goes back to the building a coalition point that we made a little bit earlier, in that, if there's only one person that can give final approval, how many others are involved in the entire process? Right? And can we streamline, maybe we can't streamline the final approval, but maybe we can streamline the steps in the process to that final approval and get, like you were saying, the ability to welcome more billable hours rather than just spending it on a review and approval meeting or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of different things to be able to take a look at when it comes to the review and approval process, not just the final person that has that authority.
Absolutely, and I would think one key point of ROI is you have employees who are not pulling their hair out anymore and
right.
happier in the workplace. We have another question from an attendee who asks about hard copy circulation at work. I think we've all discovered that sometimes you can catch more errors on paper than when people review things online. And the question is, should you abandon hard copy circulations totally? Any one of you would like to take that question? How does hard copy fit in to online proofing?
I can take an answer to that. So as was introduced for me in my background, I spent the first 8.5 years or so of my career in public relations and marketing. And at my very first firm, we created a stamp, actually. It was kind of funny. We had to have approval from 3 people. We called it the 3I rule, and we put the stamp on a piece of collateral to to have 3 people sign off on it. This was a way that worked for us, and it cut down on email traffic. It cut down on revisions. So I don't think you have to abandon a hard copy. Obviously, Michael and I both work in the technology software industry, and so we would kind of hope that you would go that way, but absolutely not. You don't have to abandon the hard copy circulation. But as long as the review and approval cycle or process is streamlined, that's the important thing here, right? You want to get more out of your productivity than what you're currently getting. So whatever way works, don't abandon a hard copy if it works, just because there might be digital options available.
But what we would hope would happen, though, is if you continue to use the hard copy method, is that working out this optimized process will reduce the number of versions that you have to deal with and the amount of paper that you're going to be having to print out and stuff like that. So yeah, don't fix what isn't broken, but I would even argue that you can catch more errors online than you could hard copy. Now, it would depend on what you've printed out and what you're reviewing. Some things I think would lend themselves to better review online than they would hard copy. If it's all text, a text-heavy document, yeah, absolutely. Hard copy is probably the best way to go. But again, it boils down to personal preferences and finding the process that works best for you. But as long as it's documented, as long as it's optimized, as long as you have control of the process, it should work.
Sounds great. And one of our attendees, we have time for one more question. One of our attendees asked about tools, to elaborate on some of the tools, some of the technologies that you might have mentioned in the presentation up to this time that are used to create workflow. What can you add to the conversation about tools and reiterate for our audience?
Oh, so there's obviously a variety of tools you can use for creating workflow depending on your size, your budget, and how you want to approach things. You can use something as simple and free as Microsoft PowerPoint or signing up for a free account at lucidchart.com. Both of those can help you create sort of they help you visualize your workflow in a flowchart manner. So, you can draw the diamonds where it says, has this particular step been completed? Yes. If yes, move on to draw the arrow to the left. If it hasn't, draw the arrow back to the right, and it hooks up to start another cycle. In our particular product, ProofHQ, again, you can build, we have a team that helps you build out your variety of workflows. So again, it's step 1, step 2, stage 1. In stage 1, you have step 1, 2, and 3, and then once it's completed, then there's an automatic notification sent to the people who are required to review the proof in step 2. And so we're moving from sort of a paper-based or a very small unit up to more of a medium-sized business, and then we can move up to John. And I think, John, you can speak to this better about the types of workflow that you can make on an enterprise level.
Yeah, we deal with a lot of workflows that from a variety of organizations that are as complex as you can possibly imagine, right? And so there's all kinds of tools available. We have the project management side of the workflow, as well as integrated with ProofHQ, of course. There's a lot of different tools that you can use. I think it really comes down to your organization and how flexible your organization could be to, if you need to purchase a new tool, or if you feel comfortable with some of these lighter tools that you have available to you, free or less expensive. But I think there's a variety of things on the market. Obviously, we'd want you to take a look at Proof HQ and Workfront as you evaluate what tools are available.
Sounds great. Well, it looks like we've reached the end of our time. Thanks to everybody for attending AdAge's custom webcast, sponsored by Proof HQ, a Workfront company. Now, if you'd like to please take a minute to answer a brief survey, we'll get a better idea of how we did today, and that should pop up momentarily if it hasn't already. And remember, you can view and listen to this presentation on demand using the same link you used to attend today. You'll get an email as soon as the archive is ready, so watch your inbox. On behalf of our guests, John Hawkins from Workfront and Michael Cunningham from Proof HQ, thanks so much for your time. This has been Chris Hosford with the AdAge team. Have a great and prosperous day.